thank you so much for joining me. My name is Matt Fox, and this is Break a Read. Today, from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I have Dr. Nicki Roman. How's it going today?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. So, how have things been in Milwaukee? How has your summer been, the transition to online learning, things like that?
It's been interesting. It's not how I thought I'd finish out my second year living in Milwaukee. But uh, luckily, a lot of my students and colleagues have kept me really motivated during this time. And the nice thing is so many things like this are happening online, and I think it's opened up kind of so many doors for collaborating online with our community, which has been
Right.
really fun to see and be involved with. So things are going pretty okay here.
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. I kind of want to start off the interview today by getting a little bit of background information about yourself, maybe where you're from, where you went to high school, things that led you to go to the schools that you went to. Yeah.
Sure. I always like talking about this question because I think a lot of people associate me as someone who kind of went up in the Illinois and Eastman tradition, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of where I am today also equally has to do with my upbringing in the high school band system in Florida. So I moved to Florida at a pretty young age. I was born in Northern California, but most of my childhood is associated with Florida. And we moved to Key West, Florida, which is the southernmost point of the US.
Mm-hmm.
Culturally, it's a really interesting island to grow up on. It's really diverse, um, especially musically. There's a lot of great Afro-Cuban music. There's a lot of professional steel pan players. So I remember going to like family friend weddings and having steel pan players as
That's so
their
cool.
musical entertainment. And so it was really fun growing up there and really interesting. We moved there because my grandmother was from Key West, and she grew up in a Cuban family. Um, so I'm part Cuban, and my mom is a violinist. She did her undergrad in music therapy, and my sister is a violinist and saxophonist, although she doesn't do it for a living anymore. So when it came time to pick an instrument, uh, I already knew I wanted to be in band, and I don't have a really epic special story as to why I picked the saxophone, but I was influenced to pick it because my grandmother told me a story once about how they couldn't afford to rent instruments to be in band, so my grandmother never got to be in band, and she always wanted to play the saxophone. So the
Oh,
saxophone
cool.
was always kind of on the back of my mind. I knew I didn't want to play a string instrument because I grew up listening to violin repertoire and I loved it, but I wanted to be different. So I picked the saxophone. My grandma actually helped me pay for my first saxophone. I've bought all my instruments, but she helped me and gave me a little loan to get my first Yamaha YAS 23.
Awesome.
Um, so I really enjoyed middle school band, and then when I got to high school, another local band director recommend suggested I take lessons, and we didn't really have a great saxophone teacher in the Florida Keys. It was really one long stretch of islands, and so he let me know that a new saxophone professor just took a job at the University of Miami, and he said his name was Dale Underwood, and I had no idea who that was, being the naive young high schooler I was. But he said, you should send in an audition tape and audition for him. And I thought, I have to audition to take lessons in high school? But I did that, and he accepted my tape, and I started taking lessons with him. And it was a 6 hour round trip to take lessons in Miami. It
Oh,
was
wow.
going to the mainland. So it was a big sacrifice for my family,
Right.
monetarily and also just time. So, but I loved taking lessons with him. I learned so much from him, and I got to kind of see what the college environment was as a saxophonist from pretty early on. And
Right.
so it was just interesting because he was teaching at a handful of universities at the time. So he'd come to Miami like once a week, and he'd walk into his lessons with a coffee cup from a hotel he's staying in. But it was really fun. That's how I learned how to drive. I would drive up and down the Florida Keys
Oh, that's cool.
for lessons. So it was really great. Um, so by the time I was a senior, I knew I wanted to get a degree in music, especially with my experience in high school band and all state and all county bands. I just knew I wanted to continue to be consumed in that environment. I didn't think I want to be a saxophone professor, or I necessarily even want to be a band director. I just knew I wanted to keep consuming myself in music and being involved. And so I had a scholarship called Florida Bright Futures, which pays for any in-state tuition at a public university.
Oh, cool.
So it's similar to what the state of Georgia has with the Hope Scholarship, and it's really amazing. So I knew I was going to stay in Florida for my undergrad, and I took so many lessons with teachers, which I think is so important. And Professor Underwood and I decided it would probably be best if I go to another institution for my undergrad, since I was already studying with him for a while.
Right.
And I met this saxophone professor named Michael Bavenzi, who taught at the University of North Florida. And my lesson there was unforgettable. And he really was the most I had been pushed in a really long time. So it was a no-brainer that I went there. I took lessons at a lot of other big name universities in Florida, but that one just felt like the right fit. They didn't have a graduate program at the time. It was a small liberal arts college, and I knew I was going to get a lot of playing experience. So I went there for my undergrad. I started as a music ed major and then switched to performance for a lot of reasons.
Right.
It's not necessarily something I'd recommend my students to do now, but for me at the time, I'm really glad I did. I needed more time to practice. And I loved being there. It was so much fun, and some of my greatest friends I spent time with there. And then the summer after my sophomore year, my saxophone professor, Dr. Bavenzi, recommended I do the Brevard Summer Music Festival. And I never heard of it. I had heard of Joe Luloff, and so I auditioned, and I got waitlisted, didn't get in. And then about a month before the program started, I got in. So whoever didn't end up going, I'm very thankful for, because that was really, really important time for growth for me. I know that first summer I went there, I made friends that I sat in classes with at Eastman many years later. And I met some really great saxophone friends there that are still great friends of mine today. So I spent 2 summers there actually with Professor Luloff, and he's someone that is going to be a forever mentor to me, even though I've never studied at Michigan State. He's someone that's just had a really big influence on me. So I'm thankful for my time there, and that's really where this idea of being a saxophone professor really intrigued me. I loved the idea of getting to teach students at that level, although I was still quite young. I just knew this idea of getting a graduate degree in saxophone really interested me, and I just wanted to keep letting my kind of learning how I could let my playing get to a higher level. So I auditioned for a lot of master's programs and took a lesson with Professor Rickmeyer, who I had known a lot about because my undergrad professor studied with her. Cool. So I ended up doing my master's there, and I was the teaching assistant there, and that was my first real experience teaching college students, and I loved it. And I felt like that was the first time I was really thriving at what I especially was something I really loved to do. So I did my master's there. Didn't really think about getting a doctorate until the end of my first year. She said, "So where are you auditioning for your DMA?" And I thought, already? So I also was pretty interested in studying abroad. So I got into Michel Goury's studio and was considering studying there, but then I got into Eastman and was offered the studio TA, which I was really interested in, and I always wanted to play in the Eastman Saxophone Project.
Awesome.
So I ended up going there, and I got to teach at the Eastman Community Music School, which I really loved doing. And I have so many cherished memories from there. And so I ended up doing my doctorate there, and I minored in music ed, which kind of coming full circle was really a great opportunity for me. And then applied for jobs and was really lucky that I got a job at the end of my doctorate. And took the job at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee as visiting assistant professor. So it's a non-tenure track line, and I took that job assuming I'd be here for a year, and that they'd do a full search once they converted the position. And they ended up asking me if I'd stay if they converted the position, and I said yes. So I've just finished my second year here, I think. Yes, second year. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today, I didn't know much about the state of Wisconsin until I really moved here, and it's a really fantastic area to live. There's a lot of really great saxophone professors in the state that are quite young, that are good friends of mine. So I'm really happy to be teaching here. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, thank you. Like, I know everyone's journey is kind of different to show like where you end up, and you know about what you said with switching out of music ed. That's something I had to choose last year, and I ended up doing the same thing. And it's a really difficult choice to make, but you're a great example of that. Like, everything happens for a reason, and when you like leave certain majors, sometimes it's for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And with that, I kind of want to move on. You're now a visiting assistant professor at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and I wanted to kind of get your insight as a professor, what it was like to switch to an all Zoom based lesson format. So like we're finally finding our groove as musicians and teachers in like the real world teaching, and then all of a sudden that just comes to a halt. And I haven't had many professors on the show yet, so I kind of wanted to get your insight on how that transition was for you.
It was very interesting. We were kind of given a couple weeks to re-envision everything we do on an online format, which we don't spend much time thinking about at all. Right. I remember getting on the flight back from NASA, and that's literally when I got the email saying we had a couple weeks to transition everything online. And it was like all I thought about on the airplane flight back.
Right.
But the easy part was teaching saxophone online. That was the easy part. The hard part was the mental aspect of it, motivating my students and realigning goals and changing goals and envision how they might be now that recitals are being canceled and competitions are being canceled. So that was interesting. Nothing about it was necessarily easy. I think a lot of it was difficult, but I think it opened up a lot of new opportunities for the students and for me too. Like, for example, we had a lot of guest artists talk in studio class that wouldn't have normally gotten to speak with the students. And so that was really, really exciting and really fun. And we talked a lot about motivation and that finding new and unique ways to seem like what we're doing is relevant, especially towards the end of the semester too, was challenging. On the non-musical side of things, I found myself just having to take a lot of breaks, physically and mentally. I tried to stand up while teaching, but getting outside, and even if it's just for 5 minutes after sitting in a chair for 5 hours and talking about the saxophone. So that's been interesting. I also designed a new course this year that the department let me do called Preparing Future Professionals, which is essentially a careers in music class. And that was a really easy class to put online. That was really, really fun to do, especially once it became online, because I brought in a lot of guests that would have normally, just like I said before, not have been able to speak. And so it taught me a lot about doing things digitally too, which even though I'm kind of on the younger end of things and people would assume I'm really like tech savvy, and I've always thought I was, once this happened, I realized I'm very much not tech savvy. So it was really interesting. It was just very nice seeing my students all the time and seeing colleagues and friends. So that was nice. And it did get easier as it went along. But I'm excited to find safe ways to do this in person in the fall. Whether it just be lessons and some things be online. I'm excited to kind of find a way to make a hybrid version, even though it won't be exactly how it was. It was very interesting. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's some really good insight on that. So you said the easiest part was teaching the saxophone, but did you have any like technical difficulties throughout that time? Like, I'm sure at least in the first couple of weeks, it was really difficult to get all the lessons. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, a normal freshman, which I have a lot of freshmen, especially this year, this is the time they're really starting to solidify the altissimo register. And we're talking about some really crucial aspects that it would be a lot easier to do in person. And even if a student comes like this close to the screen, it's really hard to talk about some concepts. And some of those students had weaker internet connection. And so I taught a lot of audio lessons. So that was challenging, but I found a hybrid way of sending in recordings and videos and also
Cool.
doing live lessons working. So with a lot of students, we'd meet once a week, but they'd also send me recordings and videos. But a lot of that happened. A lot of that happened. I started doing Skype first because
Okay.
I've always taught online lessons because I've moved a lot from different states and I've kept
Right.
my private students. So I always used Skype, and then switched over to Zoom, and a lot of things were easier. So that in itself's been helpful. Our university uses Teams, which is also different
Okay.
than Zoom. So just learning how to use a lot of different platforms has been
Right.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. But I can certainly say I feel a lot more equipped to use this kind of stuff in the future. And I think even when everything goes back to normal, I hope we keep doing these online collaborations.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I wanted to ask you, did you have any, like, I know there's Great Plains that is now going to be on the online format, and that's awesome. But other than that, were there any fun plans or projects that you had scheduled for the summer that might be moved to the fall or were just canceled?
Yeah. So I'm in a chamber music duo with the percussion professor here at Milwaukee, and we had a handful of concerts that were canceled. Luckily, we got to play at NASA. That was kind of our first concert of the season, which is funny. But that is going to be rescheduled for early fall. We were
Okay.
supposed to play at a really cool performance space downtown with another saxophone drum set duo. That's hopefully going to get rescheduled. And a bunch of school visits that will hopefully also get rescheduled. My quartet was supposed to play in a chamber music series about an hour from Milwaukee, and my whole family was going to come.
Oh,
And then we were going to immediately go and teach at a university summer camp. So all of that got canceled, but hopefully we'll be on that chamber music series next summer. I was supposed to teach at Great Plains, and I'm still teaching at Great Plains, but it's just online. So
awesome.
that's exciting. It was really exciting to hear that that was still going to happen. Something that did end up happening that wasn't is now I'm going to be a guest speaker at the Eastman Saxophone Online workshop because now
Oh,
everything's
awesome.
online. So I'm
Yeah.
excited about that because I used to teach at that. I think 3 summers in a row I taught it there, summer intensive. So
Okay.
I'm excited for that. The rest of my stuff is not canceled, so I'm just being hesitant on what I'm scheduling.
Right.
And so yeah, so things work. I assumed those would be canceled, and hopefully they'll get rescheduled or find some way to do it online. So yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to get, because I'm still like, I always have struggled to find a good practice groove, like figuring out what to do, what days of the week, and really stay consistent with that, especially when
Mm-hmm.
we're in like the heat of the school year and you have all these assignments and performances, and it's just really hard to find a good balance. And I wanted to get your insight on how to find a successful solo practice routine.
A solo practice routine. Well,
Yeah,
that's a good
specifically
question.
solo. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that for me has changed a lot over the years. I think when I was really spending the most time on that was in the end of my undergrad and all of my graduate time.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing I started doing was I started logging my practicing, and I was really detailed in how I logged my practicing, especially when it would get into like competition season and we were
Right.
balancing all of this repertoire, but I didn't want my core sound to go away. And that was really important. And so number one was having a really good warm-up routine. That was a big chunk of my practicing. That was really important. And having a warm-up routine that targeted the repertoire I was about to practice. So
Right.
like if I was going to go and practice Schmidt Legendre, I wanted to work on intonation and long tones, and that was really important. Whereas if I was going to go practice Ibert, especially like the beginning of the first movement, I was probably going to start with an articulation warm-up
Right.
so that the quality of my warm-up set me up for success with my repertoire. So logging my practicing has really helped a lot. I'm not a math person, but as soon as I started thinking about the ratio of what I was practicing helped too. But the
Okay.
logging gave me a visual of how I was practicing. And then this is really specific, but I put things in 3-day cycles. Like if I was getting ready for a big competition, I would practice things in 3-day cycles and then reset those cycles so that I was
Okay.
getting through all of that material twice before a lesson on the end of that week.
Oh, cool.
Beginning of
Yeah.
that week. So the logging was super, super helpful. And even now that obviously I'm not taking lessons, but I'm still practicing just as much most of the time, that I still take that model because it's really helpful. And then I always recorded my practicing and my lessons, and that informed how I kind of scheduled out my practicing. And so I was
Yeah.
really detailed in it. And I actually have my practice log, current one right here, which is actually the cool, what Van Doren sent all their artists, their little journal for this year.
Cool.
But I still use that, and I show all my students my practice logs too, and I let them take them home to kind of formulate their own practicing.
Right.
But in terms of being a soloist, I always viewed practicing as a soloist in equal as a chamber musician, so that I was dividing my time equally, but I was just logging it differently, if that makes sense. But I listened to my lesson recordings constantly, and that informed. I'd transcribe a lesson, essentially. Like you transcribe a tune, but you're transcribing a lesson and writing out every little thing I need to work on, because we don't remember 100% of what Dr. Creviston tells you, right?
Exactly,
It's
yeah.
impossible. It's physically and mentally impossible. So it feels really nice to work on that, kind of shed that out and cross it out on your journal, so that when you go into your lesson too, your teacher really sees that you have been spending a lot of time on that. So that was huge. And I owe credit to my good friend Evan Clark when I was a student at Brevard, who was playing in quartet with me, and he was logging his practicing. It completely changed the success I had in the practice room, which 90% of our success is in the practice room and 10% in lessons, because we spend hopefully we spend more time in the practice room than we do in our lessons. So that's really crucial. That's been really helpful for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, recording lessons is something I've always done like on and off, and I really want to stay consistent with it, because if I don't like force myself to do it, I'll forget. Yeah. And now it's even like it's easier now that more than ever, because on Zoom you just hit one button and the whole thing, video and audio, just records.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And once we go back to like in-person lessons again, I keep my Zoom out for all my. I teach at a university where my students can't necessarily afford really high quality recording equipment. So I just set up my Zoom and I record all their lessons and I Dropbox it to them. And I say, make sure to listen to your lesson. But when I was a student at Illinois, Professor Rickmeyer was really adamant about us recording everything. If we didn't record studio class, that was frowned upon. And that was really helpful for me, and always reminded me to record everything. And then if you get a really good take of something, you can use it for something later. You never know how things are. Yeah. So recording is key.
Yeah, and with that, I kind of want to transition now to the other side of things. How do you find time to balance practicing chamber music and solo? Because you're a very successful solo artist and chamber musician. So how do you find that balance throughout the day?
That's tricky. That's something that took me a little longer to figure out. And the first thing that really helped me was that I realized you have to accept that both are equal. You can't be a really strong soloist and just plug yourself into a quartet and mesh and advance. And it doesn't matter what horn you play in quartet, but really viewing both as needing to have equal amount of time of practice. Something that helped me a lot was playing in ESP, and that a bulk of my practicing was just ESP because it was so time consuming. But then that made me more organized and detailed in my solo practice. But I really needed to mentally accept that both were equal. And I wasn't this soloist that was going to go through my career just being a soloist, but also have this quartet I'm playing in. I loved quartet, and actually I got just as much out of practicing and performing that repertoire as I was as a soloist. I can certainly say that doing competitions as a chamber musician is a lot different as well. And so I really enjoyed balancing both, but that acceptance of being able to be okay with that, I think is number one. But then just really making sure you're dividing your practice time is important. Logging it is really good. Something I've done in a lot of chamber groups I've played in is we record practice tracks, especially when the bulk of what we're doing is memorizing, and that helps me with quality practice time too. is that you don't need to be spending 4 hours here and 4 hours there, but making sure
Right.
whatever you're doing is quality is
So a
really.
practice track, is that like a backing track to play along with? Is that what you mean?
We
Or?
would just record our rehearsals and
Oh,
try and
okay.
do a full take. And that was something we do in ESP a lot
Right.
is we learn. I think a lot of people think we just like memorize all the time, which we don't. We actually spend the whole first half of the semester just rehearsing the repertoire.
Okay.
And then it's really the last 4 to 6 weeks that are memorizing. And so
Right.
we record a lot of practice tracks and we use those to play along, like beginning to rehearsal B, and that's our practice track. And
Cool.
so we took that same model in quartet and it was really helpful for us. And I felt like a lot of what I was doing was much more higher quality. And I was spending less time practicing, actually, and
Right.
working on other things I needed to be working on to be successful. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for that.
Sure.
So I kind of wanted to transition out of saxophone for a bit. Since all this has started, a lot of people have been like, not maybe getting new hobbies, but finding their old hobbies that they really enjoy doing and kind of bringing them out more, that we have more time. Have you found yourself doing things that you maybe wouldn't necessarily be doing if things were quote unquote normal?
Oh yeah, I started rollerblading again.
Whoa, that's awesome.
I hadn't gone rollerblading since probably 8th or 9th grade, and I started rollerblading.
Okay.
I just moved into a house. I've never lived in a house since I was in high school, so that's
Right.
been great. I'm out of the apartment living. And we live right near the Oak Leaf Trail, which is a really long trail that I think stretches all the way across the state, and it's a great trail for blading because it's pretty smooth.
Awesome.
And so that's been interesting. It's quite the workout. The first day I did it, I had awful blisters, but I felt so accomplished. Because I used to run a lot, especially in graduate school, and then I developed tendonitis in my left leg.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really into running. My mom's a really big runner, and I kind of had to stop running. And rollerblading has kind of been this new happy medium. So it's been super fun. It's been awesome. I'd say cooking, which isn't obvious because everyone's
Right.
been cooking more, and I have been cooking a lot more, but rollerblading's been really fun. I got a hammock, so I've been hanging up,
Awesome.
which is really fun. I think that's a really good activity to do social distance. But blading and going out on the hammock has been really fun. And lots of things. I just came back from visiting family in North Carolina. Talk about a Brevard connection. My family came to visit me in Brevard one summer and realized they wanted to move there. So now my family lives in Brevard. And so
Oh, that's cool.
the last few summers I went to visit them, I went and gave a master class for the saxophone students there. So it's really cool to go visit family. And if you haven't been to Brevard, North Carolina, it's beautiful. So they live in the Smoky Mountains. So I just came back from visiting them and doing lots of hiking. I really like hiking.
Cool.
So lots of things around, and getting to just pick up the saxophone and not work on and just play things that I have time to play, and
Right.
then going out and getting outside and traveling has been really nice. So yeah.
That's awesome. Do you find yourself playing like FaceTime on the horn? Do you find yourself playing less?
Now, since I've been a teacher, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because or especially during like quarantine.
Yeah, it depends on the day. Some days I'll spend a really long time just doing warm-up exercises, which has
Right.
been really nice. And then some days I just look at my instrument and I say, there's no point in me picking this instrument up today.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do other things. But it really depends on the day. Once the country went on lockdown, I was more busy doing a lot of these projects.
Okay.
That once the semester ended, I took some time off, like I'm sure a lot of people did.
Right.
But it's a lot of highs and a lot of putting the instrument away and taking some time off, because we all need time off.
Exactly.
That's really important. That's something that didn't get told to me till the end of my undergrad, but taking time off, we need it mentally. We can do a lot without the horn.
Right.
But yeah, it really depends. I mean, I'm certainly not playing as much as I was in January and February, but I'm trying to just focus on quality over quantity.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, I'm sure that, at least for me, a lot of my practice sessions in my mind have been more, I'm practicing a lot less, like
Mhm.
around like an hour and a half a day if I even pick up the horn. But
Yeah.
I feel like the things I'm playing and the way I'm going about it is a lot more beneficial and it
Yeah.
gets a lot more done.
And I think that's kind of that's the step you take when you really start to become a mature musician
Mm,
and just start to really think about what you're doing, and then your practice time gets cut in half, really.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's something that I think about a lot. When you become a full-time saxophone professor, you also just have no time to practice at all.
Yeah.
And once you do, you're so mentally fried that picking up the saxophone is just something you don't even want to think about. And there's some
Mhm.
days where I really don't even realize I'm playing so many hours, but it's just in lessons and I'm teaching. So that when I go to pick up the instrument, I think, why is my embouchure so shot? And it's because I have been physically playing.
Right.
So that was mentally really interesting for me when I transitioned into teaching full time. That I was playing a lot, but it was just very different. My practicing looked very different. So
Yeah. Well, awesome. Yeah, I kind of wanted to ask you now. I've been asking a lot of my other guests if they have like a specific performance experience that was most memorable in a positive way, and maybe one that was like terrifying that they'll always remember for the rest of their lives. I was wondering if you had two of those that you might be willing to share.
so one that's terrifying and one that's very memorable.
Yeah, like a good
Positive one?
experience.
Okay. So my most terrifying, we've all had scary performances. One that I can think of that's most memorable is the very first studio class I played in at Illinois. The studio classes there, for those that don't know, are pretty formal. If it's still like when I was a student there, they meet twice a week, and if you perform, you dress up, and you get coached by Professor Rickmeyer for 30 minutes, half of the class, and you get formal written feedback. And so I knew that going in, and I was very nervous. And it was the third week of school, and I was a first-year master's student, and there were fantastic undergrads that could play circles around me any day, and it was pretty intimidating. And I didn't sleep the entire night before. I was just so nervous, and I think I played an unaccompanied Bach piece, and my reed was really bad. And I knew that my very first note was not going to be as well crafted as I would have liked it to be. So I was very nervous and terrified. I don't remember anything about how I played or the coaching afterwards, just that I was really
Right.
scared. But once that was over, every studio class I played in was much better. It was just a very new environment that I was not used to. And I think what I take away from that is that playing in front of your peers is really the hardest.
Right.
At any day, I'd rather just play for a random panel of judges, very esteemed musicians, but playing for your studio is a lot of pressure. And
Right.
so that was really difficult for me. And Professor Rickmeyer was and is someone I really respect. And besides in lessons, that was the first time I was going to really perform for her. And so that was terrifying. And I'm glad it's
Yeah.
over. So that's probably the most terrifying I've ever had. The most amazing performance I've had was not that long ago, and it was in 2018 after I won the NASA competition. I got to play in the winner's recital on International Women's Day, which was
Oh, cool.
like a dream come true. And up until that point, I knew I was one of a few female saxophonists that actually I was the only female saxophonist to advance like in the top 25, and then to win and to get to play on International Women's Day started to make me realize that I need to do more in this profession, and I need to be more of an advocate for female musicians. So not only was that a really special performance, but it was a big turning point for me. And then in those next few years leading to now, I'm a member of the Committee on the Status of Women. Before that, I was a volunteer with them for a year, and I helped a lot with their social media and marketing. And so that was just a huge turning point in my career to realize that I need to and want to genuinely do more projects in that direction, which was really important. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I remember I was at that was my first NASA conference, and I was at that performance. It was so amazing. I just remember watching, I was like, oh my God.
It was really fun. It's nice to see success in something and to have a really fulfilling performance, because I think sometimes that competition mindset is you're really nervous and you're really anxious. So for things to come full circle was really nice. I know when I found out I won, I was sitting right next to Professor Rick Meyer and Chen Kwan, and I remember Chen Kwan like pulling my head and kissing me on the forehead, and it was just like a really special time because it was the last year of my doctorate and I was barely practicing because I was trying to finish
Right.
my degree. So to just feel like I gave a really a performance that really felt good at a time where I was focusing on so many other things was really special. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I kind of wanted to transition into a couple random questions that I've just been asking my guests to kind of, find out more about the people I'm interviewing. So has there been a meal during quarantine that you've just been like craving, or maybe ordering like for delivery, just something, or maybe something you're making?
I've been making a lot. I got a bread maker for my birthday, so I've been making a
Awesome.
lot of pizza, lots and lots of pizza. But I'm really into making baked spaghetti squash.
Huh.
Um,
Okay.
So it's and kind of we'll put like vegan sausage in it too. I try
Awesome.
to eat as little meat as I can. But baked spaghetti squash is like my real go-to, and then homemade pizza from the bread maker. I know it's not
Awesome.
like really homemade pizza homemade bread because you're using a bread maker, but
Right.
it's been really fun. And making bagels, lots of carbs, probably too many carbs, but
No
the
such
flavor
thing.
counts. Yeah, so that's kind of been my go-to. I haven't ordered out a ton. When I have, I think I ordered Thai food. I like Thai food.
Yeah, I love Thai food.
I like a lot, everything. I basically like non-American foods. They're kind of my go-to, but pizza's been good, which maybe is in some ways considered an American food.
American, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
But spaghetti squash, if you've not made spaghetti squash, if you twice bake it, it's great. It's
Really,
great.
I'm gonna have to try it.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll send you a recipe.
Please do. Yeah, because I'm always looking for new things to cook.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
cool.
I should mention this. I have a garden, and we've been growing zucchini, cucumber, radishes, tomatoes,
That's
um,
awesome.
herbs, and so soon those will all like start blooming.
Right.
So I'm excited to use that for cooking.
That's awesome. I've always wanted to have a garden. I can't wait to get out of the apartment life,
Oh
once
yeah,
in the future and
yeah.
get, yeah,
Well, and living in Arizona opens up like a new door for types of things you can grow. Um,
exactly, yeah.
that'll be great.
Yeah. What about a favorite quarantine movie? Because I know some people have a movie that they've just been like binge watching.
Yeah. Um, for me, it's been more shows. So I watched all of Schitt's Creek on Netflix, which if you've not seen Schitt's Creek, it's pretty great. I also watched all of those trending things on Netflix during the normal beginning of the quarantine, like
Right.
Tiger King. Went through those pretty quickly. But my go-to is Harry Potter because I think I'm of the generation that Harry Potter was really in its prime. And
Right.
so kind of watching all the Harry Potter movies in a row has been really great. And I've started rereading the books um,
Cool.
because I had a lot of time when I was younger to read all the books, and now I'm going back and reading them again. So
Right.
that's really great. But I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, always been, born and bred. So going back and watching those has been really great. There's a lot of I'm getting into the part of the summer where I'm getting busy again, so there's a lot of shows that I want to watch that hopefully I can watch soon. But definitely have watched a lot of those trends that have been going around that have been pretty good. So yeah.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Cool. Well, with that, I want to kind of transition. I've been asking again a lot of my guests if they have a message of any kind to say to whoever's watching, whether that be how to like, get forward and stay motivated during quarantine or just in general life, like any advice you could give. I don't know if you have a message you'd like to say to anyone who's watching.
Hmm. I think I'll just give a message because it's in the direction of things that I've been thinking about recently, but using this time of quarantine to really think about quality projects you can be working on that are helping the community and not just kind of enhancing your playing as a player. which is a lot of what I think sometimes is like the student mindset of finding projects that can really keep you motivated, but that are helping kind of a bigger picture that is happening right now.
Right.
And then just be a genuinely nice person. That's something that's really helped me a lot along the way in saxophone and not in saxophone land, is just be a really good person and have genuine conversations like what we're having right now.
Right.
And just show that what you do is what you really love to do, and make sure it's quality over quantity, is what I would say. It's something I've been thinking about a lot, and it's something that's always kind of at the forefront of my mind.
Right. Yeah.
In the very beginning. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I'm sure a lot of people will, you know, really appreciate that. So
Sure.
and it's about that time to break a reed. So
Oh,
do you have a little bit of a backstory about the reed you've chosen to break?
I do. It's like quarantine style. So this reed was sitting on my desk. Um, it has the date March 1 on it, and it was sitting on my desk before I left for the shutdown.
Okay.
And I got back into my office at the end of April, early May, and it was still sitting flat on my desk, completely dried out. It looked like a Ruffles potato chip at the tip of it. I soaked it for a real long time and went to play it, and it was so warped that it sounded like a hurricane was coming out of the rails of it. I've tried to revitalize it and bring it back to life. I've done everything I can, and I think it's just time it goes.
Time to go. Yeah.
So it has a date on it and a little B on it, because I usually label them like whatever piece of repertoire I was working on when I broke in this reed,
Okay.
which was Bernstein. So it's time it goes. I hope David Gould's not watching, but I'm sorry, David. I'm gonna break a Van Doren reed.
All right. I actually have.
I have a question. Do you, turning the tables, do you break a reed during all of these?
No. Okay. So just the past like 4, because I bought a box of reeds thinking it was time for me to move up a size. Definitely wasn't time for me to move up a size, and like no matter what I do or how long they sit there, it's just like way too hard.
Okay.
And, yeah, and I can't play on hard reeds. My soft palate blows out very easily.
Oh.
Yeah, so I can't play on like too hard of reeds. So I've just kind of been purging them throughout.
Wow. Okay. Because I had that thought. I thought, I hope Matt's not breaking a lot, using this as an excuse to break a reed every time. So that's good. You found a good use for that box.
Yeah, hopefully, at the end of the series, I have no more reads. I just have to quit. And that's
Yeah.
it. So, do you want to count down and we can break them together?
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1.
Goodbye.
It's like a huge slice on mine.
Oh, wow. Now you're going to have to play that, and it's probably a size 6.
Oh, no. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It was really fun to just sit and chat with you and get, see what you've been up to during quarantine.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Thanks for having me. These have been a joy to watch. So thanks again for doing this for the community. And I look forward to seeing more of them.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of the summer. And I'm sure I'll see you on the Zoom Great Plains platform. Yeah.
You will. Okay. See you soon.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.